Once we have that going, what I'm going to add are leeks, fresh leeks. And all we're going to do is sweat those, right? So frying means that we would eventually just get them broken down into a browned state. Caramelization is when they'll start to turn a nice light sort of darkish color, and they'll have the natural sugars will caramelize. Right now we just want to sweat these, which means they'll be soft, limp, but they'll still have a little bit of character left in. Next, I'm going to add fresh garlic. And in this case, what I've done is broken them down into really thin slices, really thin slivers that will eventually just start to soften a little bit. But what I want is the big chunk. Normally you don't, but in this case I do. I want nice big, thick chunks of garlic working in this. And that's probably about 3 cloves worth. God, that smells good. These are 3 really powerful aromatics. The pancetta bacon, the garlic, the leeks, just a ton of that wonderful aroma. Absolutely beautiful. Now that I've got these where I want them, I'm actually going to deglaze. You want a nice sweet white wine. In this case, I'm using Moscato. And I would say, you know, in terms of a volume, probably 1/8 of a cup. I mean, we're just a very small amount. A squirt of lemon juice, so probably about a teaspoon. And what would probably be about 1/2 cup of chicken stock. I'm just using store-bought. Shame on me. Now that I have all those flavors working, it's starting to bubble up a little bit. And what I'm going to add is fresh oregano. And tomato. Whenever you're making a tomato sauce, the kind of tomato you want to use is something with a lot of meat. You don't want a tomato with a lot of liquid and seed. So in this case, I'm using plum tomatoes, and I've cut them up and then removed all of the liquid and seed. So all I have left is the pure beef of the tomato. And this is 12 plum tomatoes. just going to make sure our mixture is all good, mixed all through there. And that's it. We're just going to let this reduce on a nice high heat. Next, while that's cooking, we're going to make our gnocchi. I apologize. I know this is super low rent, but I'm working with what I have to work with. So a couple of things. When you start a gnocchi, I'm going to give you a nice small recipe. Okay, this is really easy for you guys. When you go to the YouTube channel, and God willing, this records, sometimes it doesn't. But what I'll do is at the end, I'll have the ingredients and the process. But this is 3 potatoes, just good old-fashioned Idaho russet potatoes that I've already cooked off. They're nice and soft. You know they're ready when you can easily stick a fork in them and there's little to no resistance. That's the texture and consistency you want. I have disinfected this cooktop so it is safe to work with. If you have a potato ricer, that's ideal. I don't, so I'm just using a good old-fashioned shredder. And all you're going to do is shred your potatoes. So that's 3 Idaho russets. Make sure to watch your fingers as our moms and grandmas are watching, horrified that I'm doing this. Even though I have 3 cooked, I'm actually going to end up using probably only about 2.5 maybe. It's hard to judge these things because potatoes aren't consistent. And I can't give you an exact measurement, but start out with 3 and you'll see what kind of a pile we're left with here. In fact, that's plenty. It's actually a little too much. Okay. It's hard to see that, isn't it? Okay, how about, there's not much I can do. Okay, so you're going to end up with your little pile of potatoes here. And you're going to make a little well at the center. This is just like making pasta. And this is just simply 1 cracked egg. That's it, scrambled. So we add our 1 cracked egg. And we're going to start to mix this all together. This is a messy process, so it's a lot of fun for kids. Not so much fun for mom or grandma cleaning up afterwards, or Uncle Biff. So we're going to mix all that together, the egg and the potato. By the way, when you're doing messy work around the kitchen, you want to always make sure to keep one hand clean, right? In case I've got to grab something on the stove or grab something, it's clean. It doesn't have any egg or anything on it. So we get our potato mixture integrated with that egg. And then we're going to add what is roughly 3/4 cup of flour. Again, you're going to have to feel it out. And I'll explain more about that in a minute. So we're going to start by adding a little flour. I would start with a 1/2 cup. Reserve a 1/4 cup. So we get our mixture going here. Mix that thoroughly. now that, just because I've been doing this a while, I can sense that my sauce is getting close to drying out a little bit. So with my clean hand, I'm going to reduce that down to a low heat. And now I can use this when it's free. All of my burners are taken care of. Everything's on autopilot. Now I can go ahead and get messy with both hands. And what you're going to do is work this dough, potato dough, into a consistency that thickens. We're going to add a little more flour. That would probably be the next quarter cup. So now we're back up to about 3/4 cup. And it's starting to get closer to what we're looking for. Unlike a lot of doughs, you don't have to worry about kneading time, right? So if you're working with some pastries, if you knead it too long, it'll ruin it. Or if you don't knead it long enough, in the case of some breads, it'll ruin it. That is not the case with this. Add a little more flour. When it's ready, it'll start to have the consistency like a nice bread dough. You'll start to see it, the color, the hue, the texture, all of it will start to take on something like a bread dough. Just about there. Now I know they make frozen gnocchis. You can get them at the grocery store. Some places even sell fresh that are cryovac sealed. Oh, that's cool. But there's just something about making your own pasta that you just can't replicate that time, especially if you've got kids. This is a super fun project. So I'm going to remove that. Back to my pan sauce. I'm going to add the remains of the Moscato. Loosen that up. And that sauce is ready to go. Okay. Next step is I want to clean the surface, and I'll show you why. Not just for hygienic sake, because we were working with a raw egg. There's another reason. This is when you wish you had a dough scraper, which I do not. You can't tell from the camera angle, but it's kind of like wallpaper paste. You can imagine when you add cooked potato and flour together, what kind of consistency that would have. And so not only are we cleaning and disinfecting because we used a raw egg, but because we're going to need to roll this out. And with all of that texture on there, it would be nearly impossible. All right. Now, if you've ever worked with pasta before, you know there are a couple principles that you'll want to do. The first is we're going to lightly flour our surface. So we'll make sure this is dry. And we'll flour our surface. Ideally, what I would like to do is put this in the refrigerator for a while. I would actually roll this real tight in saran wrap and refrigerate it just to help kind of cool it down and make it easier to work with. That's not so much of an option right now. So the first step is we're going to take a little knife. We're going to cut off a section. If I had to weigh that, I bet you I couldn't even guess. But basically, you're looking at about 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches into almost like the end of a bread roll. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of roll that into a ball to start with. And we're going to put that on our table. We're slowly going to roll it back and forth. Slowly roll it back and forth. And we're going to make a rope out of it. And ultimately, we want our rope to be about 1/2 inch thick. Oh, awesome. You can see it's about 1/2 inch thick. And then we're just going to cut 2-inch pieces. Take each one and make a little dough ball out of it. Till we get it into an oval shape. Now, see our little oval here? Now, if you really want to get fancy, God, I'm such a bachelor. a big basket full of utensils. If you really want to get fancy, you'll just take a fork and make little marks on it and roll it. Right? So it ends up with a little bit of a pattern on it. Something they do in Calabria in Italy is they'll take the grater, and what they do is they'll roll it across so it gets that kind of a texture. Probably hard to see, I apologize, it's a little dark in here. Now, I'm obviously not going to make all of these because that would just be silly. But we're just going to make a couple of them. So again, we start with a ball, work it into a little bit of an oval. Make sure it has a nice consistency. Give them a bath and some flour. As you watch this, you realize when you're making gnocchis for a big family how long this can take. This is a long process. I'll do one more. Or dough ball. Back onto the table. Slowly roll this out into our rope. It's about a ½ inch. Probably not surprise you, but if you're ordering gnocchi at a restaurant, not likely they're homemade. Making about 200 orders worth would take all day. All right, last one. And the rest of this dough I'm just going to reserve for later. Again, I've been working with raw egg, so I'm going to make sure to wash my hands really, really well before I handle anything else with hot water. Make sure we kill any salmonella. So we'll get a cross-contamination. Next, now that our pan sauce is done, now that our gnocchis are finished, we're ready to integrate those. And in the meantime, we're going to get some heat going. So the next thing we're going to do, I already have a dirty working area here. So the next thing we're going to do is actually breading, which I'm sure you've done before in your home. So what I've done is I've already sliced the eggplant, okay? And I would recommend slicing it into just under 1/4 inch slices. About that thickness. You want it to have some consistency. In one container, I've got my crumb. In one container, I've got my egg wash. And I've already dredged my eggplant in flour. Again, whenever you're cooking, make sure you have everything ready, right? So this will go bing, bang, boom, we'll be done. So one wet hand, one dry hand. The wet hand takes the eggplant into the egg wash. Make sure to coat it. Sometimes if you've dredged it in flour, the egg will run off. Make sure that you've actually got the egg on there. Wet hand into the dry crumb. Dry hand. And then be there to flip it. Make sure you get crumb all over it. Now, when you're doing all of these together, after you've breaded your eggplant, just throw a little extra crumb on there, okay, to separate it from the next one. Again, wet hand, dry hand. So wet hand takes it, goes into the egg wash, which is literally just that, just eggs and a little, tiny little bit of milk. Into breadcrumb. Simple as could be. Throw a little extra on there. Next one. When I was young, I worked at Tambellini's on 51 over by the Tubes. And around Christmas time was our really busy time of year. And one of our big sellers was eggplant or zucchini breaded. And we'd go through bus pans full. And a bus pan is probably 1.5 feet long by 1.5 feet deep. And all it would be was eggplant and zucchini. We'd probably go through about 50 to 60 of those a night. So every day you'd have to start all over again, starting to bread all that stuff. I'd much rather enjoy being a home cook these days. And our last one. Now, even though I cut those ahead of time, I put them in water before we started and then tossed them in the refrigerator. And what that'll do is that'll help prevent it from getting all brown. You know how eggplant kind of turns funky sometimes? water will prevent that from happening, and you can just stick it in the fridge until you're ready to work with it. These breadcrumbs are just good old-fashioned hunky breadcrumbs with a little bit of basil and oregano on it. Nothing special about them whatsoever. Now, from years of doing this, I can kind of tell when my oil's about ready or not. Just got another minute. Since I have a minute, I'll go ahead and wash my hands again. I try to be fairly clean, obviously take care of any of that foodborne illness issue. Again, working with raw eggs, you want to be careful. I will also tell you, if you saw what restaurants look like on the cooking line, you would probably never eat out again, particularly as guys are blotting out liver, getting ready to pan fry it, and then they'll use that same rag to dry out something else. It can get pretty gross if they're not careful. All right. So if you want to know how to know if your oil is ready, you don't have to dump the whole thing in. Just put the corner in, that's all. It'll let you know. If you see it start to, in fact, I'll switch over. Best tools for this, either a fork or tongs. Either one are good. Try again with the other corner. A little cold. Especially if you're going to be frying several things, you want to make sure you've got a hot fryer, or that the oil is at a hot temperature. Because as soon as I put these 2 eggplants in there, I've actually got 4 breaded. As soon as I put them in there, man, that thing is going to cool down immediately. So you'll want to make sure you've got a really nice temperature going. Now, in addition, in terms of just preparation and thinking about things, my oven is already preheated to 475. Right, so because we're going to do a mozzarella, have that nice sauce and then the cheese melted. So it's ready to go. Another try. There we go. Now we're ready. Now we're frying. If you recall, I talked earlier about the difference between a deep fry and a saute. A deep fry means that the amount of oil that's being used is actually higher than the food that it's cooking. It's literally submerging something into hot oil. A saute should never use more than heck even a tablespoon or a tablespoon and a half of olive oil. That's all you need. So we're just cooking our eggplant here. As a rule of thumb, I would say probably about 2.5 to 3 minutes on each side should be good. Again, what's nice about working with eggplant is we don't have to worry about foodborne illness, right? There's nothing you're going to get sick from eating undercooked eggplant. If you do, let us know so we can contact the Guinness Book of World Records and let them know that you've discovered a new foodborne illness from raw. So, I'm just going to lift that up and see that nice, perfect golden brown. And of course, you always want to, when you're putting something in a pan, you want to put it so it splashes away from you. So if I'm sauteing something and I'm putting a piece of meat in, I'll put the butt end in first. Think of it as feet and his head. I'll put his feet in first and then release him away from me. So if it does move the oil, it's not going to burn me. One way you'll know that they're done is they'll actually start to cook up through. You'll see the bubbles form on top. So I'm just simply going to remove. Sheet tray with some paper towels just to collect that oil. We're ready for our next two. Again, I'm splashing away from me. You'll notice as I put them in that time, notice how it didn't bubble up as much, right? Because we lost a little bit of temperature. And if I was going to be cooking any more of these, I want to turn the oil heat up just a little bit. In my saucepan over here, I'm doing what's called loosening. Loosening the sauce means that it's gotten tight. So in this case, all the liquid had evaporated. It had really started to become sort of gelatinous. I want to loosen that up a little bit. So I added some more chicken stock, just a splash more of wine, just a splash of lemon juice. That's all. And now I've got it under a heat again because I'm getting ready to serve it. Again, if you're working with hot oil and liquids, just be aware, make sure that you're not doing anything that's going to cause a liquid to hit that hot oil. I was working in a restaurant one time, and I had 10 burners. I was on fish saute. I had 10 burners going, and so 5 and 5, and these huge flames just shooting up. And we had these overhead spigots for fire safety. And I was working with some kid who just graduated culinary school, and I had all these burners working with hot oil. And he comes in with the overhead faucet to fill up a bucket for water for pasta. And as soon as he hit that faucet, it was like napalm. It was like I was in Vietnam. The whole thing just went up. And I lost my eyebrows and hair for about 3 months. All right, our last eggplant are done. As soon as they're done, I'm going to turn that oil off. I don't want that oil going any longer than it has to. Stuff is dangerous. God forbid Barney walk by and knock it off and burn himself, or I do something stupid. More likely I do something stupid. So as you can see, just that nice golden brown color. And again, anything that has touched egg, I'm going to make sure I wash with hot water and soap. And I'm going to reserve most of these for later, for dinner. And I'll simply sauce and cheese one now for you. So as I said earlier, I've already cooked off marinara. So I've already cooked off the marinara earlier. This is as easy peasy as it gets. We're just going to sauce our eggplant. And heck, if we're being honest, who cares if you use a store-bought sauce on something like this? Nobody's going to notice the difference. Just for me personally, yeah, I took the time to make it. And I'm using whole milk mozz just because I had some left over for making pizzas the other night. Into the oven. And now we're ready. We're going to finish our gnocchi sauce. So I've got my gnocchi. I'm going to dump them in that water. It should take literally like 30 seconds. Oh, they got a little warm sitting out. You always want to keep these refrigerated when possible. Just makes them easier to work with. Keeping an eye on it. They'll start to float when they're ready. That's how you know they're done. A happy kitchen is a clean kitchen. Always clean your workstation. Keep it clean. smells absolutely incredible. There we go. They're starting to float. Now I'm going to be a little delicate with these gnocchi because they were out at room temperature all that time, so they were soft when they went in. So what I'm going to do is, as I remove them from the boiling water, I'm going to put them right away. I'm going to shock them with cold water. Make sure they keep that consistency and they don't just become a pile of mashed potatoes. But you'll see that they floated to the surface. Drain them off. Shock them with cold water. And again, I'm not really interested. It's just me here right now, so I'm not going, some huge portion or anything. We have some gnocchi on the plate. Spoon a little bit of our pan sauce on there. It smells absolutely heavenly. I've got a little chiffonade basil. Some fresh basil there. And of course, a little fresh pecorino romano. There you go. So again, simple gnocchi dish. And even though it's a tomato sauce, it doesn't have to be some thick, rich, bulky sort of a dish. This dish is really light and airy with that lemon, the fresh oregano and basil and white wine. Really keeps it very light. Eggplant is ready. I'm just going to dress it up again with a little fresh Parmesan on top. Because everything is better with fresh Parmesan. And a little arugula. There you go. Two really simple dishes